Ladies and gentlemen, it is now 7 p.m. and a quorum of members is present. So the annual budget hearing of the Board of Education of the School District New Berlin is called to order. Please call the roll.
Mr. David.
Here.
Mr. Kugler. Mr. Kurth.
Here.
Ms. Manley.
Here.
Mr. Marquardt.
Here.
Mr. Maxey.
Here. Here. In recognition of the serious and important nature of our efforts here, we will join in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Please rise. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, for those who wish to prepare for the meeting, we will have a moment of silence. This is a public meeting of the Board of Education. Prior to this meeting, notice was given to the public last Friday by posting the agenda at each district school, the district office, and the city library. The agenda was also posted in the district website. A copy of the agenda was forwarded to the official paper, the New Berlin Now. Copies of the agenda were also forwarded to the Journal Sentinel and the Waukesha Freeman, all of which have filed requests for public notices. At this time, I would like to introduce those of us on the stage. We have board members, Tom David, Art Marquardt, Susan Manley, Jeff Kurth, and Nate Nickerson. On the end there, we have Joe Garza, Diana Hanson, then Joe Garza, our school superintendent. And to my right here is Roger Dixon and Joan Pock. Roger is our CFO, and Joan, Chief Academic Officer. You looked at me like I was saying that wrong for Roger, so, okay. At this time, Roger Dixon, the Chief Financial Officer, will give us a presentation on the district budget. I ask that everyone hold any questions or comments until after his presentation, and the board will actually join you down there so we can see it on the big screen.
I'm Joe Garza, I'm the superintendent of the School District of New Berlin, and I will kick off the budget hearing portion of this meeting with just some general updates about what's been happening in our school district. Obviously, there are a lot of great members that belong to our team. We have students, staff, families, administrators, and a community that supports our work. Specifically, over the course of the last year, we've received many accolades as we have over the course of the last several decades in this school district. Specifically, I want to point out, just recently in June, we had about 372 graduates to celebrate their work. They achieved a significantly high amount of scholarship intake, which $2.4 million goes a long way in furthering their education. Last year was the first year, and we informed you that there are new school report cards out that are handed down by the Department of Public Instruction. I'm pleased to announce that all of our schools met and or exceeded expectations. As I understand it, the only way that we're going to go is up as it comes to these expectations. I trust that the results that you'll see, hopefully in the next couple of months when they're publicly released, that we've made gains in these areas, and that all of our schools will either exceed expectations or significantly do so per the report cards. Again, we've been recognized nationally as well as within the state. Specifically nationally, I don't need to read the different accolades that we received, but if you take a look, we've been recognized around there. And then further outside, just beyond the academics, Energy Star, Project Leader Way certification, and a fit-friendly workplace. What did we focus on last year? We worked on educator effectiveness. The biggest impact that's made is by the effectiveness of the teacher in front of those kids. It's not necessarily the number of teachers that we have in the district, it's how effective those teachers are within the classrooms that they have those students in. But it's the single most important factor on moving student achievement forward. And we've got a lot of great staff in the district. We implemented new assessments. For those of you that are parents in the district, you're aware of now these MAP scores for your elementary and middle school students. We never tracked measurements like that in the past. Fortunately, the board allocated resources for us so that we can utilize and inform our work for our staff and for our students. But that's just one of several different key points that we can use to triangulate data to move our work forward. We also focused on literacy professional development. Again, it's the only way that you can move your work forward is by making the teachers and your staff better. And that's what we've tried doing specifically in literacy education. Our math curriculum was outdated. Some of our resources were between 12 and 25 years old. We've updated those resources for our staff. We also have implemented new district communication strategies. And we solidified an information technology plan, as well as a long-range facilities plan. I won't read the slide for you, but these are the 4 key areas that we're going to focus on moving forward. These are the themes that pop every year within this district, and it's summed up in the slide that I have for you. And this is what we're going to be focusing our work as we move forward. Take a look. What you see up there is nothing new, but they are the key themes of what we'll work on and will continue to do so. So with that, I will hand it over to Roger Dixon, our Chief Financial and Operations Officer, for the budget hearing, and then we'll allow for a brief amount of time to answer some questions as best we can so we can move into the annual meeting portion of tonight's event.
Thank you, Joe. I have the pleasure to share with you how the school board is planning to allocate resources to meet the instructional needs and to continue to grow the school district going forward. I'll be throwing a lot of numbers up. Numbers can be boring. Numbers can be, so what? What you need to understand is behind every one of the numbers that you'll see, there is a story. There's a story about education. There's a story about learning. There's a story about instruction. There's a story about relationships between teachers and students. And that's the type of thing that we want to be sure that our resources are aligned appropriately to support the teaching process, to support the learning function. Last year came before you, reported a structural deficit going into this year of $1.9 million. We had 25 million plus of facility needs, and we had just closed Glen Park School. I'm now able to tell you that we have a long-range facility maintenance plan in place. The school board has adopted. We are going to be using some of our fund balance for those facility needs, and rather than a structural deficit of $1.9 million, we have a balanced budget. But looking forward, based on the way the school finance is done in the state of Wisconsin, we will continue to have a structural deficit. Structural deficit means that our estimated increase in costs will be greater than our estimated increase in revenues year in, year out. So we are going to have to continue to look for more efficiencies, more ways to be able to do the same or more with less. We are a school district that has an extraordinary amount of debt within the operating budget, and we still have several unfunded facility needs, which I'll describe shortly. Last year, we projected a structural deficit, I indicated to you, about $1.9 million. We made the corrections that we needed to when we adopted last year's budget, so that when we started this year, we were only looking at a $105,000 deficit. $105,000 through various means and tools we have available in the budget. We have the balanced budget. But going forward, for the 2014-15 next school year, we're looking at $742,000 structural deficit. 15-16, $1 million. 16-17, nearly 1.5, and 2017-18, nearly $2.3 million structural deficit. It's important that you see these numbers and the school board adopts the budget for the next year, for the school year that's going to just be starting shortly. They can't just adopt a budget for 1 year. They need to look forward several years and say, okay, what decisions are we making today are we going to be able to sustain going forward? These are the numbers that we have to deal with. These are the things that the board already knows that over the course of the next year and 5 years, we're going to have to make more wise decisions as to how we're going to allocate sources, because we will not have enough revenue to pay the costs without making some significant changes. What causes a revenue limit, a structural deficit? Main cause is that our revenues only go up less than 1%, but our costs go up significantly faster. Labor costs between 2 and 2.5%. Fuel increase, we are estimating this next year to be 40%. For the budget we just got done with, we estimate an average cost of $2.50 a gallon through the year. Next year, we're estimating an average cost of $3.50 a gallon and hope that it stays that cheap. Property insurance increases 25%. Utility costs increase 1.5%. Now, the utility companies have asked for 5 to 7% increase in their rates. We are budgeting 1.5% increase because we are doing things to keep our energy costs down. We need to continue to update the curriculum and resource materials, and we are going to suffer costs as a result of significantly increased federal agency oversight. Everything we do, and not only do we know we're doing things correctly, but now we have to spend time and energy and money to document and demonstrate that we're doing those things. It's the new emphasis coming from the federal government. So revenue let's only go up less than 1%, all of our costs going up significantly more than 1%, we will have a structural deficit. So what will we do? As I indicated, we have to find ways to spend the money better. What we'll have to continue to find more efficient ways to do our staffing. We will have to continue to reduce our health benefit costs. We've already moved in our budget. Our health costs used to be 1/6 of our total budget. It's down to 1/8 of our total budget. We have found ways to have economies in that particular cost item. Have to find less expensive ways to deliver services. The board will continue to look at and will continue to refinance outstanding debt whenever it makes sense to do so. And we will continue to look for and will aggressively seek energy efficiencies, including in this very next budget. The things that we have not necessarily looked at so far, but we know we're going to have to start looking at further, we are going to have to continue to restructure services. This last year, we went to contracted services for our cleaning. We changed the way that we do transportation from door to door to corner to corner. Those kinds of cost savings are going to continue, so there's going to be less service for what we are asking you to support us with your dollars. And then we need to analyze what level of support will the taxpayers, will the school district continue to be able to give for those activities that are other than core mission. Core mission is direct instruction to students working their way toward graduation. We have a number of programs and things that are outside of that core. How much longer will we be able to continue those to support those programs at the level we have been? I indicated we have a lot of debt within our operating budget. All around you, when a school district needed to take care of their buildings, they would go to the taxpayers, ask for referendum approval, and raise taxes. This school district has taken the approach multiple times to incur that debt within its operating budget. Compared to a traditional approach, this district has completed $28.8 million worth of projects within the operating budget that all the other districts around us would have gone back to the taxpayers and said, give us some more money to do this. On an average base per household, that's about $2,800 savings. But what that does to us, it makes us look like we're not spending the money on education, because you'll see that New Berlin, the portion of the budget available for education, we are the lowest in the county. We believe that even with these constraints, with so much debt within our operating budget, and the fact that we are the lowest in direct cost of education, this school board, these teachers, this staff is delivering a remarkable product. As Mr. Garza shared with you, we get accolades in the state and outside of the state, national recognition for the things we do, and we do it with a tight, fiscally prudent manner. Next year, we'll be asking for $4,600,000 to repay debt within the operating budget. The tax impact from that is $1.09 a thousand, or for a $250,000 home, $272 of your tax bill is just to pay debt that's within the budget. This is money that, as indicated twice before, all our surrounding communities would have put directly on the backs of the taxpayers as an additional tax. When we have that much debt within our operating budget, it reduces the funding we have available for direct education by $995 a pupil. That's enough money to hire 54 new teachers. Jumping into the 2013-14 operating budget, one of the first things we look at is what is our financial position? How are we doing as an organization, and do we have resources to take care of emergencies? This chart shows what we call fund balance. A household thing might be your net worth. Our fund balance, as you see, dropped to 2007. Since 2007, we have significantly increased the fund balance. Is that a good idea to increase fund balance? It is if you have a plan and it's being done purposeful and for a specific reason. The specific reason I alluded to earlier. We are going to start to use a portion of that fund balance to address the facility needs that we have in this district. So the board has already looked at, of course, the next 2 years, spending about $3 million to start to address some of the needs at Eisenhower. We may be able to do more of that later as we move down the road. Revenue assumptions, investment rates are going to remain low. Our general aid will decrease 15%. That means there's a direct relationship between general aid going down and property taxes going up. General aid is property tax relief. If we don't get as much general aid as we used to, the property taxpayers have to pick up that difference. Our open enrollment aid is going to decrease. We'll see a slight increase in some of our categorical aids. Property taxes will go up $1.1 million under this budget. This is our distribution of our revenues. On the far left is property taxes. As you can see, property taxes pays for nearly everything in our budget, $47 million. The next largest source is state aid of $7.8 million, going down to $7.5. The other numbers are not, they're significant numbers, $2 million and plus, but they're not a significant portion of the budget. Property taxes, state aid, that's where the relationship goes, and it's an inverse relationship. Next year, we are projecting a tax levy. I have an error in here, and it's an error in the printed document that we'll get correct for you later. Projecting a tax levy of $47,500,421. Tax rate, although there's still going to be $11.27 a thousand. Compared to last year of $46,356,000, the tax rate of $11, a tax rate change of 27 cents per thousand. What does that mean? Take the value of your home, divide by 1,000. So if you have a $250,000 home, divide by 1,000 is 250 times 27. That's the estimated increase that you will have in your property taxes to support the schools next year. So your school tax will go up from $2,750, $2,817 or $67, or 2.4% increase. Of that $67, $7.50 is directly related to energy efficiency projects on this $250,000 home. I'll demonstrate that in just a few minutes. Here's what's happened to our tax levy over the time. This is a percent change in the levy, so you can see it jumping up and down. I think the key, does this have a pointer? Is the straight line through. It's not as obvious on here, but it is a line that's coming down. That means that the school board is continuing to work hard to create a trend line where the size of the increase, the percentage increase in property taxes, is on a downward trend. It gets difficult from one year to the next, as you can see, because of the jumps and the peaks and the valleys. But the trend for the last several years has been downward. The expenditure side of the budget. Labor costs, wages will increase 2 to 2.5%, as I indicated before. Payments to the WRS will increase 7%. WRS is Wisconsin Retirement System. During the economic downturn, they suffered significant losses. They are now going to have been building up the reserves over the course of the last 5 years. This is the last year of large increases in the WRS. Of that 7% increase, 1/2 of it's paid by the school district, the taxpayers, 1/2 of it's paid by the employees. Health benefits costs are going to decrease $1 million in this budget. That was achieved by 2 years ago, the school board making significant changes in the way that the health benefit program is designed for this district. And so we've now been able to see some of those savings accrue to the benefit of the overall budget. And so it's going to be a $1 million reduction in costs. Indicated to you, new instructional materials adoption, $450,000. General facility maintenance increases of about $250,000. As part of the long-range facility plan is an additional $1 million. Again, I'll talk about in a second. Our total expenditures, $62 million. Of that, we have certain amounts that are restricted. Food service, $1.6 million. Community service, $428,000. Grants and aids, if we get a federal grant, we can't use it for anything, just anything we want. All that money comes to us with specific strings. Those strings tell us what we can use it for, and that's the only thing we can use it for. Debt payments within the budget, $4.6 million. Libraries, we have $153,000, leaving us with net expenditures of $53 million. Of that, we have certain mandated programs. $27 million goes to instruction, $1.3 million goes to pupil services, $2.8 million to transportation. Did I say that? Instruction is $27 million. We have certain support costs. It's all, as you can see the numbers. The big number here is the $8,357,000 for facilities. That number is $250,000 more on a regular basis over last year. But this board, as I indicated to you before, we're going to use some of our fund balance. So with that fund balance, the board has added a $1.2 million to facility needs. So this number is about $1.2 million larger than it was last year, actually $1.4 million larger than it was last year, so that we can start to address the facility needs, particularly at Eisenhower. This is a graph, and it's I find it very difficult to see from where you are as to, if you divide the budget up into categories, 48% is in instruction, then you got another 7% in instructional pupil support, so basically you have 55% of it directly going to the benefit of the children. The buildings and grounds, transportation, 18%. We have to take care of the buildings, you have to provide transportation. This is how the budget divides up when you look at it from a functional point of view. Objects is what are the things and the services, and then 57% of our budget goes to salaries and benefits, 23% is purchase services. That's things like utilities, the bus service that we buy when we hire somebody to come in and do construction on the building. Supplies and books, 6%, capital expenditures 2%, debt service 10%, and insurance another 1%. I could do this like a weatherman does it, maybe. In addition to the operating budget, the school district has adopted a long-range facilities plan, and are making a significant commitment on the capital side. Out of the annual budget for the next several years, the school board has approved a plan of spending between $900 and $1.2 million every year on capital needs. And they fall into these broad categories: health and safety, law and code updates, outdated core mission facilities, energy savings, outdated other than core mission, etc. I want to point out that the outdated core mission facilities is the least amount of money. So the first question that a lot of people ask is, well, boy, it doesn't seem like you're spending much money on your core mission. That's because we have always taken care of the core mission. While we've allocated all the money to the core mission, other facilities have been allowed to age more than they should have been allowed to age. Infrastructure has been allowed to age more than it should have been allowed to age. So now we have to get caught up on all those other than core mission areas. Energy efficiency projects, we're going to be spending $6.2 million at Eisenhower, $930 at West, etc. You can see the numbers. So there's about almost $8.2 million worth of energy efficiency projects that the school board has approved as part of this budget. The board will be borrowing that $8.2 million, repaying it over a course of 15 to 20 years, and there's a guaranteed energy rebate or the energy savings that comes along with this project. It's part of a bill that was put through when Mr. Walker became governor that allows school districts to engage in energy efficiency projects, but there's a requirement that you have to jump through certain hoops, and there has to be a demonstrated and quantifiable savings in energy costs that is guaranteed by an outside firm. These are the things that the school board is going to attack out of the fund balance for the next 2 years. Upgrading the science rooms at Eisenhower, almost $1 million. Locker room remodeling and replacement, almost $1 million. Softball replacement or upgrade, $290,000. Project Lead the Way, we need to move more of our education into the science, engineering, technology. So we're going to be upgrading some facilities there. Professional collaboration space, fancy way of saying we're redoing the offices, about $600,000. We have a number of facility needs have been identified to show up on the facilities long-range plan for which we have not identified a funding source. They include air conditioning at Orchard Lane and Popper Creek, upgrading the pool at Eisenhower, gymnasium space at Eisenhower. Eisenhower has significantly less gymnasium space than does West. Our outdoor facilities throughout the district are in need of upgrades and modifications and correction. Parking lots throughout the school district have been neglected. And Eisenhower, being the oldest building with the least amount of work done since it's been built, just needs some general updates. So the recap, the lessons to take away. District continues to face a long-term structural deficit, as I indicated it early on. The board has in place a long-range facilities plan to address many of the identified projects, but we do still have some unfunded needs. Within all of that, for the 2013-14 year, the property taxes will increase 2.4% because of less general aid, rising costs in general, and the energy efficiency projects. So with that, I believe we have a few minutes left to open up for questions. Mr. Garza and I will try to respond to the questions. I do the technical budget stuff. Mr. Garza does the policy and programs things. Do you have any questions for either of us? Yes, ma'am. I heard the first part of the question. We've got 8.2 million. Yes. Yes. It is a hefty loan. Very fair question. We characterize it as energy efficiency. There's a significant operational efficiencies as well, count in that. The way the bill is put together, we must be able to guarantee some energy savings. The energy savings is about $240,000 a year, but there'll be significant operational savings because we'll be upgrading a lot of our equipment to more modern equipment. It's going to require less maintenance, less upkeep. The payback on that, I don't have it at my fingertips. I'm going to look over there, but I'm the one that should have it. I don't have it, so I can, if you leave your name and email, I can be glad to send that to you. We're talking, the loan will be a 15-year loan. But the cost of all of these projects will not have a direct, there's not a one-to-one relationship. We're also able to upgrade some facilities under that funding provision in the statutes.
Yeah, part of the issue too is a lot of the equipment that is at Eisenhower is the original equipment when the building was built in 1969. So imagine if you had an HVAC system in your own home that was, developed in 1969. That right now our maintenance guys are customizing parts because they don't make them anymore, and it's really just a general upgrade that we need to make. That of course we'd love to see the dollars line up where we're going to get every dollar paid back, but unfortunately. Even as you're purchasing any energy efficient refrigerator, you're not going to see a payback at the life of that refrigerator. I wish those numbers would come a lot closer together, though, so I agree with you with that.
But to answer your question, these systems are designed to last 25 to 30 years. We've got over 40 years out of the system at Eisenhower. Doesn't owe us anything anymore. So although it's going to take us 15 years to pay it back, the system will be there longer than 15 years. Yes, sir. We've run the numbers. Under the way the school funding formula works here in the state of Wisconsin, I can't see how the numbers come out. We're still going to have to pay somebody else all the costs that we incur, the cost of the acquisition of the building, the cost to maintain the building, the cost to light the buildings, and the cost to clean and keep the buildings up to speed. And all those costs we have to pay now, plus somebody else is going to have to get interest rates with a higher rate than we can get them. We pay very, very low interest rates, and they're going to need some profit and overhead, which are already factored in. What? Now, the last time we borrowed was last year. We paid under 1% for our loan. We are projecting for the energy finance projects, we're projecting about a 3%, between 3 and 3.25%. Yes. Actually, the pool is not part of the planned updates. It's one of the unfunded matters, but the auditorium is fully funded. Those updates will be taking place over the course of the next 2 years. In fact, I'm going to guess we already have the new sound system in, I think. It's part of the general updates for Eisenhower. But yes, the auditorium has, we've heard from feedback, and that is in the budget. Yes? No, that'll be done between now and January, I believe. I'm looking at Andy. Yes. No. We have been doing that each year for the last 7 years. And so, for example, the year we just got done, we moved a lot of expenses into that year so that we could smooth out the year that we're just entering now. One of the things I neglected to mention is when you look at those numbers, how they increase. It goes from 740 to 1.5 million and down. Well, when we address the 740,000, that takes 740,000 out of the next year. So when you address the deficit in the early years, it reduces the structural deficit going forward. The support staff in the district was significantly cut back several years ago, and we found back with that cutback that we were unable to get the jobs done, unable to provide the support that we needed to for the schools and for the teachers, and so those are cut back as far as they're going to be cut back. In fact, we're adding a secretary next year. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
That question was brought up actually to our school board over the course of the last couple days, in fact, just the last 24 hours. Specifically, just like we do throughout the entire year, we check class enrollments, and especially this time of year, they are quite dynamic. They fluctuate with lots of kids registering because obviously schools are around the corner, and at the same time, those kids that are registering elsewhere have to be have their things removed and their registration removed from this district to register in other districts. Because it is so dynamic, it's to make an investment of roughly $75,000 to $100,000 for a teacher when those numbers are that dynamic at this point wouldn't be the most cost-effective way to move into that. I know that in years past, and while some may believe that it wasn't the best way to do it, we did bring in teacher support as needed, when the school year started. Again, while not ideal, we don't want to put that burden on the budget, given the structural deficit that Mr. Dixon refers to. The other thing that I want to refer to is the raw data is, 28 to 1 would be the ratio, but in actually some of those classrooms, there were two, there was another co-teacher in that classroom in some cases. So you actually have two certified teachers in the classroom. That also doesn't bring into account the support that's brought in by the specialists. We also have a math and literacy specialist at each of our buildings that provides support. We also have support staff that supports those teachers in those classrooms, which in some cases in other school districts just isn't the case. Again, sure, it may not be ideal at this very moment, but it is something that we're constantly looking at. Mr. Maxey and the school board, we've been looking at these numbers every day all summer. And even into last spring for that matter. So some of the things that we're looking at now is obviously as we get closer to the school year, we want to make sure that we're not making a decision that's going to impact us financially in a negative way. At the same time, a classroom with 28 students, when it's specific to student need, because the research out there, if you look at John Hattie's research, specific to classroom sizes is one of the least impacting factors of student achievement in a classroom. There's a list of several more. I know you're shaking your head, but I know that it's not a popular assumption, but it is something that's research-based. It's not just something that's off the top of my head. And again, it's not a popular one either when you're talking to teachers, and my daughter's in that classroom that you're referring to. And personally, I don't have a problem with it. But nonetheless, I do think that we look at student-specific need also. If you have students that are achieving at a significant level, as well as, if you don't have an effective teacher in that classroom, one of the things that John Hattie mentions is, if you don't change your practices from a classroom of 35 to 1 to that of a classroom that's got 10 to 1, it doesn't matter. The impact on achievement will be naught. Just because of the simple fact that you need to change your practices to be an effective educator. But nonetheless, we are looking at it. I understand it's a sore point. It's something we're actually working with the school board to inform them of some of the research, that it's not just a student-to-teacher ratio that should be the only thing that's considered in making that decision. But we'll ultimately we'll work with you, and again, Mr. Linder is the point of contact as he's most directly involved, and essentially will make the best decision for the students and recommendation thereof as well.
Don't get into a debate with a single person.
Sure. And not all parents. Sure. Understood. Yes.
I think we're missing something in Joe's. You've missed something in Mr. Garza's response. Looking at a class size 1 to 28 isn't the only thing to look at. Many of those classes have 2 teachers in them. That brings your teacher-student ratio down to 1 to 14. No, they are not. That is not true.
But historically, this school board has granted us approval of hiring a teacher as needed if those numbers warranted as such, and not just specifically the number, but the specifically student need within that classroom. I think the last time we hired was roughly the middle to the end of September. Again, we're constantly looking at it every day.
Another question over here?
You want to respond? Our chief academic officer can specify that. She was also a director of student services prior to.
The reason the special ed teacher is in the classroom is because of the special ed children and their needs within the classroom. However, there is something in the law that's called incidental benefit, and that is that they can take other students into a group that may be struggling in that same concept. So that teacher plans with the gen ed teacher, and they plan for all students, and sometimes the gen ed teacher works with the special ed teacher, and the special ed teacher runs the group. It really depends on the relationship between those 2 teachers. So we have 2 certified teachers in that classroom that we view as being responsible for all students. And I know many of the, at least some of you have had your students in classes with special ed kids with co-teaching going on, and you realize that both teachers are working with your children. Though again, the special ed teacher is there for the special ed students in that classroom. Otherwise, we'd have special ed teachers in every classroom. So really, the reason they're there is the special ed kids. However, the shared responsibility of that classroom is between the 2 teachers.
If there are no other questions, I'm going to suggest that we move to the annual meeting.
Budget? Questions?
For either side, actually. This time, do I have a motion to recess to the annual meeting? So moved. Motion by Mr. Marquardt, second by Mr. David, to adjourn to the annual meeting. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. The first item on the annual agenda, and for those who've never been to an annual meeting before, I, Dave Maxey, President of the School Board, act as the temporary chair until a permanent chair for the annual meeting is elected. So do I have a motion for a chairperson?
Mr. President, my name is Tom David, 4348 South Regal Court in New Berlin. I move to nominate David Maxey to serve as the chairperson.
Okay. And any other nominations? Any other nominations for chair? And the third time, any nominations for chair? Okay. Yeah, Gib, I guess a legal point here. Do I need to hold a vote if there's only one nomination? Okay. Asking for a motion to close nominations. Okay. And well, I guess all in favor? Raise your placards. And it's unanimous, correct? Okay. I am the chair. As I announced earlier, this is Gil Berthelsen. He is our legal counsel, and I appoint him as our parliamentarian. Okay. The second item on the agenda is approving the rules of order. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, management would like to make one recommended change in the agenda under item number 7, the property tax levy. Management is recommending approve a tax levy in the amount of $47,500,421, 47500,421. The rest of the motion would remain as printed.
And that's the number that you made reference to in the budget hearing.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Now do I have a motion for the rules of order? Okay. Motion and a second. Please raise your placards if you are in favor. And keep them raised until okay, and opposed? Okay. 3 opposed? Ayes have it. Motion approved. The next item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? I have a motion by Jeff Kurth and a second to approve the agenda as printed. Oh, as amended, actually. Thank you, Diana. All in favor, please raise your placards. Keep them raised until voting is counted. And those opposed? Seeing none, motion passes unanimously. The next item is the treasurer's report. At this time, Art Marcourt will read the treasurer's report unless I have a motion to dispense with the reading.
Mr. President, Tom David, 4348 South Regal Court. I move to dispense with the reading of the treasurer's report.
I have a motion by Tom David and a second to dispense with the reading of the financial report. Any discussion?
I'd just like to point out that that financial report is printed and in the document, so it's
Thank you. That's a great point, Art.
other discussion.
Pardon?
Other discussion.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is the financial reports.
I, Art Marcourt of 17940 West Barris Road, would move to approve the treasurer's report as presented.
Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. And is there any discussion? As a point of order, anyone who does have an item of discussion, please just come forward and come to either microphone. Okay, all in favor? Those opposed? Seeing none, motion passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is a resolution to adopt a tax levy for the 2013-14 school year.
I, Art Marcourt of 17940 West Barris Road, move to approve a tax in the amount of $47,490,420, including $1,102,000 for capital expansion, be levied on all property, real and personal, within the bounds of the School District of New Berlin, City of New Berlin, Waukesha County, Wisconsin, for the purpose of financing the educational program of the public schools of the school district for the year 2013-14. This amount is slightly lower than the amount requested by the administration, in keeping with my promise to always move for a levy lower than the revenue cap formula would otherwise provide. And that $10,000 lower will, the administration will be asked to find some spending offsets that aren't related to children to reduce that spending and not take that money out of fund balance as well.
Do I have a second? Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Marcourt, a second. As put by Mr. Marcourt, And as a point of order, there was discussion after his motion. Is there any? Correct. And is there any other discussion?
Andy Stefanson, 2121 Ridgeway Drive. Just a clarification. Wasn't that motion supposed to be for 47,500,000? Didn't we amend that earlier? I thought he read the...
As Mr. Marquardt had stated, he actually reduced that, and in the amount of, what was it, Mr. Marquardt? Okay. Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none or hearing none, all in favor? Those opposed? Motion passes by a vote of 29 to 5. Next on the agenda is setting the date and time for the 2014 annual meeting.
I, Nate Nickerson of 15190 West Harmony Drive, move to authorize the school board of the School District of New Berlin to establish the date for the 2014 annual meeting between the dates of May 15th and October 31st of 2014.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All in favor? Those opposed? Seeing none, motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is the Board of Education salaries.
I, Susan Manley at 14785 West Wilbur Drive, move to keep the annual salary of the school board members at $3,500 and salary of $5,000 for the board president.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Those opposed? Motion passes by a vote of 28 to 1. Do I have a motion to adjourn from the annual meeting?
I would like to ask you just make an announcement or request if there was any other business right before the meeting,
I'm not quite sure what you're asking for there, Mr. Marquardt.
There's only about a dozen things that the electors can do, and the electors certainly would be free to do any of those other things that are on that list.
We can certainly do that. Is there any other items that somebody would like to bring forward? Seeing none?
We have the floor for a minute.
And Mr., yes,
I'm
Gibb,
going to turn this on.
the blue button, or the red one, sorry.
The red one. Mr. Arcart, I hope this is on. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, well, I'm going to move it up closer then. There is a provision in the statute having to do with the annual meeting that allows individuals to present items to be placed on the agenda for the annual meeting. The item is presented, to my recollection, to the clerk of the board, who then determines whether the item up for discussion or up for a motion is an appropriate one given Wisconsin's statute having to do with the annual meeting. There's only about 8 or 10 subjects, and even then some of those subjects are kind of narrow, that are actually within the power of the annual meeting. The reason for that is because then in the notice, by the way, if he or she, the clerk, determines if that's an appropriate subject for the annual meeting, then it goes on the agenda for the annual meeting. Then the notice that goes out to all of the people in the school district of New Berlin are notified that that particular item is on the agenda for the annual meeting. It tells people who are interested in that subject to be certain to be here for the purpose of discussing or voting upon that particular item. It's a little bit like the open meeting law notices, although I won't go as far to say that the open meeting law applies to this. It doesn't. It may well be that there's a subject that is the appropriate subject for an annual meeting. I just always worry when this comes up that you're going to pass something that the rest of your community knows nothing about. And therefore they could not come to this meeting because it wasn't in that notice that was sent out to everybody. So with all of that in mind, and who knows what the subjects are going to bring up, I caution everybody on that subject. Remember, there are many tens of thousands of people here who may have looked at the newspaper to find out what the subjects were tonight, and they've found what we've seen so far. They haven't seen, or they didn't hear about what we're going to hear now. So let's continue.
Well, I guess as a point or a question for you then also is, the agenda has also been approved by those here this evening. Can we amend that?
Well, I think you have two political questions, not necessarily legal questions. I don't know what the answer is between the two. I don't know what the answer is between the two competing provisions that I talked about before. Number one, there are certain items that are okay to be discussed at an annual meeting. Number two, if you want to discuss one, you're really supposed to go to the clerk, I think it's 60 days before the annual meeting, and tell her about it or him about it so that it can get on the agenda. If really forced on an issue like that one, I would recommend that the chair make a decision one way or the other on it and go forward. As it relates to the item you just mentioned, meaning items on the agenda, yes, you could take a hard line and say it's not on the agenda, but then I wonder politically if that's the appropriate thing to do, given the fact that maybe the people who were voting on approving the agenda didn't realize it would be interpreted in that way, you see?
Well,
so in fairness, let's hear what he has to
listen
say and
Russ
go on from
Find out
there.
what it is and go from there.
Russ Belford, 4640 Delphine. Yeah, the reason I came is I wanted to ask some questions about the pool and the plan for the pool at the last school board meeting. I think the school board asked the administration to estimate a mill rate on doing the new pool project under the energy efficiency exemption option. And so that's why I came today, and I think that topic passed me by before I knew it. But is that, well, I do. It was, I believe it was 2 cents per $1,000 of assessed value for 2014 and 5 or 6 cents per $1,000 of assessed value for 2015. Pretty sure that was it. So my question was, given that it appears there is an option under the energy efficiency exemption credit to address the pool. The pool's 44 years old, lots of repair problems, lots of maintenance, health issue problems with the filter. Could say 50 to 70% on energy and chemical savings, not to mention get rid of future repair costs. My question was to the board or the administration, what's the plan if that breaks down next year? It sounds to me like there's not a plan, but I'd love to hear what's the plan. Or the discussion between the board and
You know, that might actually be better for privilege of the floor at the next, at the meeting that's going to follow this immediately. That may be a better point for that.
And I tend to agree. I'd have to stretch real hard on these 9 or 10 provisions in the annual meeting statute to determine that, in fact, that's the appropriate subject for an annual meeting. It would be better brought up, I think, at a school board meeting.
And there'll be one following this shortly. So, do I have a motion to adjourn the annual meeting?
Annual meeting, sir?
Okay.
Second.
Do I have a second?
No discussion.
Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Those opposed? Seeing none, motion passes unanimously.
Back to your board meeting.
And do I have a motion from a board member to reconvene our regular board meeting?
Good job.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Marquardt, second by Tom, to reconvene to our regular board meeting. And we'll give everyone a moment to come back on stage here. I have a request to take a 5-minute recess, so please, I guess visit the restrooms or whatever you may need to do, and we'll begin again here in about 5 minutes. Okay. We're returning from our short recess. We'll begin our regular board meeting this evening with recognitions. Mr. Garza, if you can start us off.
I'd actually like to invite your student school board representative, should say former student board representative, Stephanie Seymour, to please come up. Specifically, Stephanie has served on your board as a student representative for the last 2 years, representing Eisenhower. She's been involved in a multitude of different items and ensembles and so on. She's involved in music and is a violinist. She's also involved in soccer. She volunteers, and obviously she's a student leader. Specifically, she was president of the student union and was also the recent class valedictorian at Eisenhower. She will be attending UW-Madison, the medical honors program there. And she's provided some great insights to you and to myself throughout the last couple of years. And we are definitely going to miss Stephanie, and we wish her the very best of luck as she transitions into the commencing of her college career. So with that, we'd like to thank you, Stephanie, for your work and dedication to this school board and this community, and we wish you the very best of luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Well, for sitting through many long, boring meetings, one or two exciting ones maybe here in this room as well. The next item on the agenda this evening is privilege of the floor. And I do have two requests for privilege of the floor. There's a short statement I read before this, and that is that you approach the microphones. Please state your address, name and address, sorry. Each presentation is to be restricted to a maximum of 3 minutes. Privilege of the floor will be limited to a half hour. Well, with two statements, that won't be an issue this evening. Presentations are not to be designed for the purpose of engaging others in debate in this forum. Discussion of certified, classified, or professional personnel or of individual Board of Education members shall not be considered an appropriate topic for this forum, and the speaker will be ruled out of order. Our first speaker this evening will be Scott, and the second is Russ. Before I get to that, by all means, it won't take long. I just want to remind everyone that this portion of the meeting is really so that the board can sit and listen to your concerns. We may take notes and pay attention. Of course, we'll pay attention, but we may take notes and things like that. But we don't necessarily answer you immediately at this time. We may get your information, which you provided. You'll probably get a response of some kind from us if there are any questions and things that we could answer for you. But Scott?
Scott Yench, 6005 South Carrington Lane. And first off, I'd like to thank all of you for your service. It's a thankless job and it's difficult. If everybody wanted to do it, you'd have much more competition in the elections. But that said, many years ago, I remember hearing a story, a fictional story, I'm sure. It's about a minister who repeated many of his sermons to his flock. And after several times of hearing the same sermon, somebody came up to him and said, "Why are you continuing to do the same sermon over and over again? Are you short on ideas or what's going on?" He said, "Well, as soon as everybody stops committing those sins, I'll move on to other topics." So that's why I'm here banging the same drum that I've banged before. And the first one is about the school district website and communications in general. As time goes on, it is very wise to always examine methods of communication, especially those that are probably the most effective, especially in this electronic age that we live in. Using email, using the website, using both push medium and pull medium. And I still feel as though the school district website is very lacking in that regard. I've seen very little marked improvement over the years that I've been drumming about this, and I would like to see you and encourage you to do more. I think there's much more that can be done, and there's very little that I see being done, so I would encourage you to use that resource more fully. An example is the summer drama program this summer that was held here at West. We didn't find out about it until after it had started. There was no emails about it. There was no official district communication that we could find. We did find it. It was on the website, but we had to go digging for it. And that was unfortunate. It would have been nice to have participated in that. The second subject is something that was brought up during the annual meeting, which is class sizes. Mention was made of research, and research is a great starting point, but it can be too broad to apply to individual situations. And therefore, I repeat my welcome to all the school board members to experience class sizes for themselves, experience those classes for themselves. Don't go in for a 10-minute meet and greet. Go in there for a good amount of time. See what it's like. See what those kids are when they're no longer paying attention to you, and seeing what the teachers and the students are doing. Communicate with the teachers. Find out, can they achieve the effectiveness ratings that you guys need to put on to them and want them to do, given the class sizes and the resources that you're giving them. Talk to the parents. Find out if it's really being effective. It's the only way to close that feedback loop to make sure that it's happening. And we talked about current class sizes and how dynamic they are, and the fact that there are resources available. I think it would be very helpful for parents to see some sort of an online tool that would examine class sizes across the district and what resources are being available in those classrooms. So if there is an abnormally large class size, what resources are being applied to them? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. Russ? Can we pass these down to Diana?
Russ Belford, 4640 Delphine. Guess I'm just repeating what I said a little bit earlier. At the last school board meeting, it sounded as though there were school board members making a request of the district administrators to find out what the additional costs would be in terms of taxpayer impact of using the energy efficiency option credit to address the pool at Eisenhower. The pool at Eisenhower, as we all know, is in tremendous need. It's been studied many, many times. 44 years old, has insufficient depth. It's a liability risk. Filtration is old. Energy efficiency. Many studies in the public domain that say we can save between 50 and 70% in chemical, labor, and energy costs by addressing it. So it seems to me like at the last meeting there was discussion, topic, and you know, future avoidance of repair costs look to be like a really great opportunity. So I was really hoping to hear from the folks on that side of the table to give us an update. You know, where are we? We've had this facility long-range plan going on for a long time now. The girls have been without starting blocks in that facility for 13 years. I've been back and forth on this issue since 2007, and the answer every year is maybe next year. We'll look at it next year. Well, for the girls, who primarily are the ones who use that facility, it seems like next year never comes. So it seems like this is the opportunity to do something. And so I'd like to hear, you know, what the plans are for. It's not a matter of if, but when that facility will require more expensive investment. Last year, we were down for about a week and a half while gutters were being rebuilt. Every year, you know, there's something pretty major, and I think what we heard at that time was, we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to repair this thing anymore. We're going to address it. So I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Russ. The next item on the agenda this evening is the President's message, and I do not have one. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
I would move that we approve the item on the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Markort, second by Mrs. Manley to approve the consent agenda as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. This brings us to our regular agenda. Do I have a motion on our first item?
I'll move it. Sorry. Move to approve I'm sorry, do I have that right? Performance contract? Okay, sorry. Move to approve performance contract with vendor to complete the energy efficiency project scope previously approved by the Board of Education.
Second.
Mr. President, I'd like to just inform you that I will be recusing myself from this question.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion by Mrs. Manley, second by Mr. David, to approve the contract with vendor to complete the energy efficiency project scope previously approved by the Board of Education. Any discussion?
Well, Mr. President, just so the public knows that this has been brought up and we've been working on this for some time. Just the entire process of how we chose this vendor was scrutinized, and we reviewed it a couple of times just to make sure that we're doing everything proper. And I just want to thank Andy and Mr. Garza, Mr. Dixon for their diligence in really getting this done right. So this is completely above board. I'm proud to support this.
I do want to also just make sure the board recognizes that we do have legal counsel here if they have other specific questions that we can't answer as was requested by the board.
Does anyone else have any questions for our legal counsel, or maybe we kind of describe the process? If anyone would like a description, even in the audience there, please raise your hands. Be happy to have our attorney break that down and explain the process. Okay, hearing or seeing none. I do have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. The second item on the agenda is discussion, possible approval of initial resolution authorizing general obligation bonds in the amount not to exceed $8,200,000 and calling a public hearing in connection therewithin.
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion by Susan Manley, second by Mr. Kurth. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Just as a point of order, our next two items are policies, and this board has a kind of an unwritten rule that we never take action on a policy on the first time that we look at it. Gives the public the opportunity to raise questions, the board to raise questions to the administration. This is actually our second read for these two policies, so do I have a motion on them? We'll take them one at a time.
Mr. President, I move that we approve policy 1326, media waiver and internet publishing.
Motion by Mr. David, second by Mr. Kurth. Oh, Mr. Nickerson. Any discussion?
Mr. President, can we get the nickel description of this for the public, as long as we still have quite a few people here and people watching? This is a new policy that affects our students.
Definitely. Joe, are you prepared for that? Do you have it in front of you? Thank you.
Yes, this was provided on the website as a document to the public when it was posted. But specifically, this is a brand-new policy that we're bringing in as part of our work and updates of our policies. And specifically, this one deals with ensuring that we can utilize, at times, photographs, photographic images, names, audio recordings, and/or video recordings of students for purposes of general publicity and publications, and so on. So that's the purpose of this specific policy.
Thank you.
And then the last paragraph would be kind of the operative paragraph of this policy, which is that parents and guardians who do not want their children to be interviewed, photographed, or recorded for school publicity or news media purposes must submit a letter in writing to the appropriate building principal, and that media opt-out is good for 1 year at a time. So just so everybody's aware of that, it'll be part of your enrollment package in the fall.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. The second policy is a revision to policy 5125, student records. Do I have a motion?
I would move that we approve the revisions to policy 5125 as presented.
Motion by Mr. Marquardt, second by Mr. Kurth. Any discussion?
I would just like to mention that this policy change, one of the big things that it's doing is updating the list of what's called directory information for the information age by adding guardians' email addresses to the otherwise things that used to be in our list of things that were considered directory information. And again, there are specific opt-out notifications that would be available to you if there's email addresses that you want opted out or what have you. So there is, this is again, is just bringing it forward to more of the electronic communications where we're adding some additional information to what we're considering our directory information so that parents can contact other parents. We've had telephone listings and other mechanisms for years now so that parents, especially in the high school and middle school, can keep track of what their children are doing at other people's houses by, parent-to-parent communications, and this is just another piece of that.
Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. The last item on the regular agenda is future meetings and dates. There'll be a board meeting Monday, August 26th in this building. It'll be in the library or the Idea Center in the back of the building. There's a staff kickoff program Wednesday, August 28th. It'll be in the new field house. The first day of school is Tuesday, September 3rd. And there'll be another board meeting here again Monday, September 9th. Again, it'll be in the Idea Center or library. Do I have a motion to adjourn to closed session?
I move to adjourn to closed session. I don't want to do that. Consideration of movement into closed session pursuant to section 19.85, 1C, E, and F of the Wisconsin statute to consider C, job performance, compensation, employment of public employee over which the Board of Education has jurisdiction and exercises responsibility. E, deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, and F, to review personal histories or disciplinarian data of specific persons which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories and data. Board to discuss and have possible action on, let's see, which one are we doing? Thank you. A, approval of closed session minutes of July 22nd, 2013. B, employment, performance, and compensation matters pertaining to staff. C, update on negotiation strategies. And D, discussion and approval employment service report.
Please call the roll.
Second.
Well, yes, sorry, second, and please call the roll.
Mr. David?
Yes.
Mr. Kurth? Yes. Ms. Manley?
Yes.
Mr. Markort?
Yes.
Mr. Maxey?
Yes.
Mr. Nickerson?
Yes.
We will be adjourning to closed session, returning to open session if there's any items that need to be taken care of in open session. So unfortunately, I don't have a time frame for you. If you'd like to stay, we may be coming back. I was going to actually talk to him, but I'll send him an email. Please do, yeah. That way he knows that, we can't.
use my own. See? Yep. Oh, shoot, this is not muted.
being on stage is normal for me.
You're probably all wondering why I gathered you here. Come on, nobody stayed? I want to do that. Let's go, Jeff. Trump's gonna come up soon. Yeah. You gotta.
We are returning from closed session to open session, and there is one item that does require action. Do I have a motion?
I would like to move to approve the employment services report as presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Marquardt, second by Mr. Nickerson. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Meeting is adjourned.
Does it every meeting.